Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
Hello. How are you this Tuesday, December 10th? I hope you are having a great holiday season. You know, one of the things that is really helpful in these tough political times when we're very worried about what is going to happen to our country in the next year, think small, think your personal life. One of the ways we're going to get through this is by being connected with people who boost our endorphins. This is not the time to try to worry about finding common ground with your MAGA friend. Maybe we just let that relationship be quiet for a little bit. Now is the time where if you want to have political discussions, you need to find the people who are your people. Maybe you should look into joining an indivisible group. Maybe there is a local Democratic organization in your community. Now is the time to come together with like-minded people. And you know what? If you really feel just so disheartened by politics that you don't want to go there, that's okay too. Connect. Find some way to connect. Pursue a hobby. And join a group. I mean, if you're a runner, find a running group. But I think running is, well, I don't know. Jackie Bang likes it, but it ain't my cup of tea. Never has been, even when I was good at it, which was a very long time ago. Is there a hobby? Is there something you've always wanted to learn? I bet your local library has classes. Almost all the libraries I know have some kind of adult education stuff. You know, learn how to use your computer better. They have those kind of classes all the time. Do something that brings you joy, or something that at least is satisfying. That's really important, because it's so easy to be overwhelmed now, you know? It's so easy to just look at all of it like there's this big tsunami crashing over your head. And I suffer from the same thing. And my daughter reminded me recently that when she was going through a tough time, I told her not to focus on the mountain that was in front of her, because mountains are big, but rather, you know, just take a tiny bite. Whatever that mountainous situation is, just take a tiny bite of it. Do one thing. When I feel overwhelmed, I think of one thing I can do. Sometimes that one thing is fun. Sometimes that one thing is, you know what I can do today? I can call the phone company or the cable company, and I can get help figuring out my bill. It's not something that brings me joy, but it gives me a sense of control over my life. Are you a subscriber to the Tribune, the Chicago Tribune? Have you called them lately to see what you're paying? Eric Zorn in the Picayune Sentinel is always reminding people that the Chicago Tribune, particularly if you get anything delivered to your house, but over time, they increase your bill. They're counting on the fact that most people aren't going to notice. Oh, we're going to raise your bill X amount of dollars because you now qualify for our premium issues. Well, I don't want your premium issues. Keep your premium issues. You know, so sometimes if it seems like too much work to find something, a new group to join or something that brings you joy, just do something that makes you feel like you have a little bit more control over your life. David Hochberg is always saying, that if you log on to the website for your credit card and pay it off, don't wait till the end of the month, pay it off. You do that, well, he says do it every week. I don't know, that seems like a lot. But even if you do it once a month over and above your payment, so paying it twice a month, that's going to help your credit score. I have found that even doing mundane household tasks can give me a sense, not so much of accomplishment, because, let's face it, cleaning. Nobody ever notices when your house is clean. They just notice when your house is dirty. But it gives you a feeling like you have some control in what otherwise can feel like a really out of control world. Oh, that's my little emotional boost for you for the week. So let's talk about some news. Locally, the $300 million property tax increase that Brandon Johnson wanted for the city of Chicago and was voted down 50-0 by the Chicago City Council. Then it was reduced. It was only going to be $128 million. Yeah, that didn't really sit well with a lot of people either. Now he has reduced it to a $68.5 million property tax increase. And today it got through the Finance Committee on a 14-12 vote. Not a huge margin, 14-12, but it got through. So now it's going to go to the whole city council. They will probably vote on a budget this Friday, which will be good because the city of Chicago was headed toward a budget shutdown. Something that passed so narrowly in a committee means that there's still work to do. He still has work to do to get this thing passed by the entire city council, but at least there's a shot now. At least there is a shot. And one thing, maybe this will put a smile on your face. Remember when I was talking to Greg Hines, the political reporter for Crane's Chicago Business yesterday, and we were talking about what the proposed Trump policies might do for not only the national economy, but also our local economy. And we made reference to tariffs. He made a reference to the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And it's so weird because a few days earlier on social media, I saw where somebody took Ben Stein as a high school teacher and dealing with these high school kids. And there's a whole segment, there's a whole little speech about tariffs in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which at the time I saw it on social media, I thought, well, this is funny. I'll save it. I don't know if I'll ever use it for anything. But then when Greg Hines made reference to it yesterday, unfortunately, I hadn't sent it to Paul, so we didn't have the soundbite ready to go. But I sent it to him last night. This is Ben Stein, high school teacher, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, attempting to teach those North Shore kids about tariffs. I hope this will bring you a smile. Listen to this.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? A tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered, raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
Anyone? Anyone understand tariffs? Anyone? We are going to open the phone lines right now, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Anyone want to call or text anyone? We're going to take a real quick break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. On WCPT 820.
What else is going on? Anyone want to contribute? It was really brought up short by this news reported in the Tribune today. You might have heard that Ryan Sandberg was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He announced today that it has spread. He's going to be undergoing more intensive treatment. And our positive thoughts and wishes go out to him. It was just last August that he said he was cancer-free, but it apparently has come back roaring, as cancer is wont to do sometimes. Can't talk about prostate cancer without thinking about Lynn Bramer. Over a decade, he fought prostate cancer before he finally succumbed to it. Our best wishes, our thoughts, all of our positive energy going out to Ryan Sandberg. What's going on in Syria? Well, Israel seems to be taking advantage of the fact that the Assad regime has fallen in Syria and apparently is conducting airstrikes. They are reported to be targeting military installations, a possible chemical weapons facility, and apparently multiple airports. Benjamin Netanyahu signing off on this, even as, if you've been watching cable news, even as he is beginning, making his first appearance in an Israeli court. Remember, he, like somebody else you might know, has been facing charges of corruption and was supposed to go on trial earlier, a trial that was, of course, delayed because of the Hamas attack and the ensuing war on Gaza. But he testified. He actually showed up in court and testified. Lots going on in the Middle East. Later today, I want you to know, probably in the 4 o'clock hour, we're going to bring back Behnam Ben Talablu. Just last Thursday, I think it was, we were talking with him about the situation in Syria. And one of the things he said was that Syria was really important to Iran and Russia. It provided them with the ports they needed to get from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, and that he thought that Putin would work very hard to make sure the country did not fall to the rebels. Then the country did fall within days of that discussion. And it was reported in the Washington Post yesterday that Assad actually reached out to his supporters, and we know who they are because there aren't that many of them. He reached out and asked for some help, and help was not forthcoming. The only help, apparently, that Vladimir Putin was willing to provide was safe haven in Russia for Assad and his family. Apparently Assad, I don't know who Assad told that he was bolting, but it was apparently a huge surprise in the country. He was scheduled Saturday night to make a big address to the country. And when the time came, it was like, where is he? You seen him? Is he in the hallway? Somebody go get him. We got the camera. It's the camera. Everything's set up. Nobody could find him. He'd already gone. Rather than making a big address to the country, he bolted. And he and his family are now in Russia. So we're going to, at 4 o'clock, talk to Benham and find out how things are going to evolve in that particular part of the country. It's very volatile right now. But at least Israel, taking advantage of the disarray and the chaos and the fact that there's really no formal government right now, to get in and take out some of the military facilities in Syria. By the way, if you guys, when you call in to chat for this first hour, as we usually do, if you guys want to talk about this situation with the murder of the United Healthcare CEO, then that's fine. But it's not something that I'm going to cover, at least not in the near future. I usually don't cover crime stories. Now, I know that there's a lot of political implications with this one, since apparently this young man really wanted to make a statement against healthcare companies. So we'll see how it evolves. But one thing that's been driving me crazy, in addition to everything I read every morning, I also keep an eye on CNN just to see if there's any breaking news that I want to pay attention to. And every once in a while, there's a crime story. Virtually always a crime story involving a white person. And they become obsessed with it, spending vast amounts of airtime on every aspect of a terrible crime against usually some white person. And I've really just gotten sick of it. I've gotten so sick of it. Like, this is the only murder? Oh, wait, no, it's not. But, you know, this is what? High-profile, rich white guy? Head of a insurance company? Ooh, yeah, that's magic. If CNN gave other crime stories, like, say, a crime story that has to do with the murder of a black person or a brown person, yeah, that might get a mention, but it's not going to get the relentless, nonstop, breathless coverage that this particular crime is getting. And I'm just tired of it. I don't know how much influence the anchors have over what's in their show. Everybody thinks that the anchors have all the power, and in some cases that's true. Rachel Maddow, Lawrence O'Donnell, they're not going to have stuff in their show that they don't want to talk about. Trust me. But it's not always true of other anchors. There are executive producers, there are managers, there are lots of big bosses that somehow, sometimes will decide what they think the coverage is going to be. I don't know if you've heard about the billionaire doctor owner of the LA Times, the guy who decided that his paper was not going to endorse Kamala Harris, even though the endorsement had been written. He's now decided that he wants to implement some kind of artificial intelligence button. Like when you read a story, you can click the AI button, and the AI is going to tell you like how factual the story is and whether or not there's any bias. If there's bias in his newspaper's There's always bias on the opinion pages. That's what the opinion pages are for. But if there's bias in the main pages of the LA Times, it should be rooted out in the editorial meetings. It should be rooted out by the reporters. So what good does this button do? We want reporting that is fact-based, even-handed, fact-based. We want opinions in the editorial pages that are opinions and not necessarily as fact-based as the rest of the paper. So what's this button going to do? Call out crummy reporters, bad editors, and a biased newsroom? Hello? Argument number 543, why billionaires should not own media. Jeff Bezos, remember when he said that he was going to be hands-off? Oh, no, I want them to be a world-class paper, and I'm not going to interfere. Until he did. They can't help themselves. Anyway, I'm falling behind here on the text line. I hope you will give me a call as well, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. We are going to find out what you think about things when we come right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
By the way, in a newsletter I get from Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky reminded me, I talked about how this Friday the City Council of Chicago is expected to vote on a budget because the city of Chicago, was heading for a potential shutdown. But now that Brandon Johnson's budget has squeaked out of the Finance Committee, the entire City Council is going to vote on it this Friday. So it looks like that is, the way this City Council, I was going to say it's something we don't have to worry about, but the way this council has been with this mayor, they haven't, shall we say, seen eye to eye a lot. So let's just say there's going to be a vote this Friday, and we will see. Jan Schakowsky's newsletter is reminding me that there is also going to be a big budget vote in Washington. Remember how Mike Johnson didn't want to force a budget vote on the entire budget before the election? So he kicked the can down the road. They got enough of a budget to get them to January. Except that the congressional holiday recess starts December 20th. So they need to pass their spending bills by the end of next week, or we are back on the precipice again. I don't know. Now that Trump is elected and they have both houses, you would think that this would be the perfect time to get a budget done. Well, we'll see about that. Okay. Some of the texts we have been getting, tariffs. The narrative concerning tariffs coming from Fox and the right is that it will encourage manufacturing in the United States. Well, this person says that would be great if there were modern, retooled factories all set to go, but I very much doubt it. And that is an astute observation. If you want to put a tariff on something that comes from China, something that maybe because China has been selling it cheaply for so long, we no longer make here, putting a tariff on that substance product from China is going to make it cost more here. And, the texture is correct. If we had a factory that was just sitting unused, but it had used to manufacture widgets and it's ready to manufacture widgets again, and we've decided that the widgets from China are going to be more expensive, maybe it would encourage manufacturing, but that infrastructure doesn't exist anymore. Even if you knew that Chinese widgets were going to be a lot more expensive and it might potentially now make sense to produce them here, how long is that going to take to ramp up? How long is it going to take? Build a factory, hire the workers, get the distribution lines. Yeah, ain't going to happen anytime soon, which means simply that we'll be paying more. Along those lines of paying more, one of the other things that might throw us into dark economic times are the government cuts being proposed by Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. They've decided that vast numbers of federal employees can be fired. They're not needed. They are not needed. This is something that's going to have a ripple effect. Jasmine Crockett, our favorite congresswoman from Texas, was talking to Chris Hayes last Friday. And she, by the way, Paul, do you know if this new bureau, is it Doge? D-O-G-E. I think it should be doggy, but, that's just me. This is the group that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have created, and they are the ones who are going to bring about government efficiency. They're going to just get rid of everybody. But you know what? The thing is, those people actually make the government work. You need a form, you need something, you need to find out about benefits. Those people may not exist in the very near future. Anyway, Jasmine Crockett was talking about this with Chris Hayes on Friday. She is always worth listening to. So, Paul, go ahead and play that.
Democrats saying, hey, yeah, look, we should be open-minded here and maybe work with these two individuals to slash wasteful government spending.
Listen, I don't know what's happening. I mean, I do know that Jared did join this caucus. And a caucus is different from an actual committee. So I have no idea. Right now we don't have our committee assignments. So I don't know who's going to serve on what committee. I will tell you that they did decide that they were going to have a subcommittee on oversight for DOGE. And it is going to be led by none other than Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? So it'll be interesting to see who becomes the ranking member on that subcommittee. And when we start to talk about the committee work, then yes, that is actual work of the House. And whoever is assigned to work on oversight and assigned to that subcommittee, then they will start to do the work. But oversight in and of itself exists to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. That is our job, and we oversee every single agency, and that is what we are supposed to be doing. But what they are proposing right now from the likes of Ramaswamy, talking about getting rid of 70% of the workforce, well, let me tell you, everybody that has complained about how behind their passports were or their Social Security checks being messed up or their IRS checks not arriving on time, well, let me tell you, something is about to happen, and it doesn't sound like it's anything good if we are going to reduce the workforce instead of increasing it and giving them the resources that they need. And mind you, the people that claim that they were voting because they were feeling a way about the border and it being overrun, the border has been underfunded too. So I don't know how you're going to kick everybody out of this country like they are proposing to do while at the same time reducing the workforce.
One of our texters just responded to my observation that if we get rid of a lot of government workers, there isn't going to be anybody to help us when we're trying to figure things out like benefits. And they texted in, well, if they get rid of the benefits, they won't need the forms and they won't need the workers. I joke, but not really. One thing we have to keep an eye on here, Social Security and Medicare. Donald Trump and the Republican Party promised us over and over again that those were sacrosanct, but they will not be. Republicans lie, and they lie about that. Elon Musk has already said that there's going to be a war on the poor. What do you think that means? If they come after Social Security, we need to do what we did when they came after the Affordable Care Act. We need to go to the offices of our congressional representatives in person, hopefully as a group, and sit down and say, we will be heard. You vote to reduce Social Security, or worse yet, privatize it or kill it off, and we will make sure we kill off your political career. And on the subject of tariffs, somebody else texted in, tariffs are meant to cause a recession, to depower workers, and further increase the leverage of the ultra-wealthy. And then added they hope to use their almost total control of the press, which is sometimes how it feels that mainstream media has capitulated way too much to the Republican Party. They hope to use their almost total control of the press to deflect blame to minorities. It has been said over and over again that if you want to do a tax cut for the ultra-wealthy and you know that's going to be unpopular, what do? Focus people on an issue that divides them and that will make them angry. Oh, but let's talk about trans people. You know, you hate trans people. Oh, by the way, we're going to give Elon Musk a big tax cut. But we hate trans people. Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Ron is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Oh, pretty good today. The voters are Tom Homan. He was in Chicago yesterday.
Yes, he was, wasn't he?
Yes, you know, he was talking to local Republicans, and he was saying that Chicago is going to be the first target for mass deportations.
Yep.
Yep.
He said that they're going to hit Chicago hard. Tom Homan, this is a guy. Trump made him border czar, and I fully believe that Trump did that because that's some made-up job, and it doesn't require Senate approval. Because this is the guy, Tom Homan, who thought up this wonderful idea of taking babies and children away from their families. We'll be so cruel and so disgusting that everybody will be afraid to cross the border. Yeah, so no, he doesn't require Senate confirmation. You're right. He was in Chicago speaking to a Republican group, and he said, your mayor sucks and your governor sucks. That is a quote.
Right, I heard that too, yeah. So what is immigration going to do when they get here? Start arresting everybody who isn't white?
Well, he claims that he's ready to arrest Brandon Johnson if Brandon Johnson does anything to try to protect or hide undocumented people.
Well, that's a broad statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also the right-wing media has now given the Republican senators their marching orders as far as the cabinet nominations. They have said that they have said that if you don't have any damning evidence, then don't interfere with the election process.
If they don't have any damning evidence, like the fact that Pete Hegseth is an accused rapist and a drunk, like that kind of evidence?
Right, I like that kind of evidence. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And talk about the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah. Well, maybe they want. Yeah.
Well, I still think the fact that Trump is still publicly giving lip service to Pete Hegseth. But when Trump was interviewed by Kristen Welker, I'm trying to remember exactly what she said and what he said. And it was something along the lines of, like, will you go to the mat for Pete Hegseth, or are you putting your credibility behind Pete Hegseth? And he was like, no. It's like, like he's got to fight his own battle, and if he succeeds, that seemed to be the implication. I won't ask him to step aside, but I'm not going to go down with him. So, yeah, there's your boss. A lot of faith in you. Thank you, Ron.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
We are going to take a real quick break. We have more callers to get to right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are, in the 3 o'clock hour, going to be talking to somebody we haven't chatted with for a while, William Campbell, who does the Here's How podcast, which is all things going on in Ireland. Find out what is going on. There was that statement by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom recently. Apparently, Donald Trump had asked him if he was going to side with the United States or the European Union. And to his credit, he made a speech that following weekend and said, no, that's no. That's not how it works. We're all in this together. I don't choose one side or the other. We're in this together. At least that's the theory. Anyway, William Campbell, who does the Here's How podcast of all things political, social, and current affairs in Ireland. We're going to be talking with him. Let's go back to the phone lines now. Our good friend Jim from Chicago is on the line. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Joan. I'm happy to listen to Mr. Campbell. I can't wait to hear him. But I was going to say, today you're talking about the federal government workers. My mother was a widow with 3 kids, and she got a job for the federal government in OSHA. And she's glad to get it. Worked like a mad woman, and would discuss her work. And her 2 sisters worked for the federal government, and she was married to another federal government worker. They all worked very hard, Joan, and they were very dedicated to their jobs. And Musk, this maniac, talking about unions, my other side, everybody else was in the union, Joan. I mean, you name the union, bricklayers, carpenters, electricians, all of them. Everyone. It was a family party. Several be federal workers, several be government workers or union workers. Mm-hmm. This guy's trying to. He's disparaging. You heard him talking about unions with Trump. They don't want anything to do with unions. Well, the Republican Party has nothing to do with unions, but to disparage the federal government workers like there's some kind of moochers, like they're moochers, like we could do without them. I mean, these people are going to work every day, Joe, getting up every day, taking a shower, putting their clothes on, working 8 hours a day, coming home. I mean, is he kidding or what?
I don't know.
I don't know either, Joe.
And remember, everybody talks about, oh, my God, he's a genius. He did not invent the electric car. He bought Tesla from the 2 guys who created it. People forget that little bit of history. He didn't start Tesla. This wasn't his big, brilliant insight. His big, brilliant insight with Tesla was getting a big handout from the government, because in the early days of Tesla very nearly went under. And if it hadn't been, and this is just the irony of ironies, if it hadn't been for a big government handout, Tesla wouldn't exist. Tesla would have been a disaster, a bankruptcy.
I understand it, but why is he? What is his effort in trying to rule Australia? And his pictures are all over the place. Did Einstein have his pictures all over the place? I didn't recall that. I know that Ford had his own paper. Henry Ford had his own paper that was anti-Semitic, but it wasn't like this, where this guy's on every time they bring him up on the news, they got about 16 pictures of different shirts he's wearing and so on and so forth. I mean, he's looking for celebrity like Trump did. I mean, they're dying to be celebrities. Not only do they want to be the richest people in the world, but they want to be the most renowned celebrities in the world, which is really odd in my book. But anyway, Joe, I can't wait to hear Mr. Campbell what he thinks of this insane election. It's unbelievable. 4 years, Joe. 4 long years. Can you imagine this?
No.
But anyway, thanks. No, I can't either, Joe. I can't.
I can't either. We're going to have to pace ourselves.
No, I know, but you know, you got to talk about it, which is true. What aversions can we take from politics? I mean, in other words, a book. You mentioned a book club or anything to divert your attention from that, because it's only going to. Make you sick. That's all I can say. Just thinking about it makes me sick. Anyway,
and
Joan,
Jim,
you.
I have a couple of political books that I got from the library. Maria Ressa, the woman from the Philippines.
Right. She's
I had
great.
her
She's
book
great, yeah.
and another book by Hannah Arendt on tyranny. But I've got to tell you, it's like I have limited bandwidth these days. And sometimes I just feel like I can't concentrate on anything that requires a lot of thought. So for now, my book club is going to be, I think, robots and vampires. Robots and vampires. Preferably, if you can recommend a book that has robots and vampires. Woo!
Right. I know what you mean, because if you get too lost in deep thought, it's almost excruciating at some point. You've got to get some kind of a laugh. Once in a while, I'll laugh at night. I mean, like, this is such a comedy. In some ways, a comedy of errors that I bust out laughing. But when you hear the decrepit way that you're going to govern. Anyway, Joan, I can't. Let's hope Bill Campbell's got something good to say. Thank you, Joan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I got a text from somebody that said, they're tired of hearing this accusation that Republicans want to cut Social Security. Sweetheart, I wish I'd have got, because they want me to provide proof. I wish I had gotten your text sooner, because I have the goods. When this, remember Rick Scott, the senator from Florida? Rick Scott flat out talked about Social Security. He did it, oh my God, last year. Would you like to, Paul? I just sent you the link to the Rick Scott soundbite. Could you maybe pull it off while I talk to Paul, and so I can play it for Ty when I'm finished with my conversation with Paul? Okay. Let's go to the phone lines. I will have Ty your proof for you in just a couple of minutes, but first I'm going to talk to Paul from Seattle. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Joan. It just really enraged me to hear you say that Tom Homan said that your mayor sucks and your governor sucks. Mm-hmm, well, I'm sorry that Tom Homan's job, apparently he hates the citizenry of the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, because when he says yours, that's who elected Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker are the citizens of the state of Illinois. I thought his job or his goal was to rid us of the illegal, to protect the citizenry of the several states from the illegal.
Well,
but now
in his remarks,
he's saying your mayor sucks and your governor sucks. Those are the duly elected representatives in your state government, elected by the citizens. And so I have a message for Tom Homan. Tom Homan, you suck, because you're not elected by anyone. You don't even have to be approved by the Senate. You're just Donald Trump lackey. And there's really you don't really have any credibility. Borders are, huh? Okay.
And, and Homan in his remarks said that they were going to start with the undocumented folks, because all the immigrants were saying, I'm a good immigrant, I obey the laws, nobody's going to come after me. He said we're going to start with the ones who've broken the law, but that's not where it's going to stop. He said we'll start with them, and then we're going to move on to all the people who are undocumented. So I guess being a good immigrant isn't going to get you very far.
Well, it's just there's no reason for him to. Obviously, that's blatant blatant partisanship just to say because, regardless of what the electorate thinks of Brandon Johnson or J.B. Pritzker, what that signifies is what he believes in is the big federal government telling you states what to do. The federal government can say that the people elected Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker, and they had to be citizens to elect those people. And so he's exactly off track in terms of who he's talking to. If he wants to condemn the illegals and say all the bad things, okay, I get that part. But he's insulting the wrong people. The people have voted for Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker, and he's saying your mayor sucks and your governor sucks. That means that's you, Joan, citizen of the state of Illinois and citizen of the city of Chicago.
Yep. And God help us if we need anything from FEMA during the 4 years of Donald Trump, because he's going to either drag his feet or find a way not to provide federal funds. Remember how he wanted to do that for Orange County, California, when they needed federal help, because he thought Orange County were all Democrats, and he's told his aides, why should I help them? And then his aides had to point out to him that actually most of Orange County, California was Republican, and that they voted for him. Yeah. Yep.
Well, I wonder if did the Democrats, are they still able to control the weather even when they're not in power, or does that just come with the government, the authority of majorities in the government? Because if hurricanes are hitting, Florida and the Gulf Coast under Trump, then it must be them controlling the weather, because I don't know that the Democrats took the weather controller with them.
Well, I just thought of that. If the Democrats are controlling the weather, can we have like a hurricane or a tornado or a huge snowstorm for the inauguration on the 20th? I would like to see that. Where do I fill out the paperwork for that?
Yeah, it's exactly. It's amazing.
Is that like a witness slip or?
All these outrageous ideas will disappear, just like this guy, this texter who doesn't think that the Republicans want to get rid of Social Security. How come he doesn't know? He hasn't heard that Rick Scott?
Good thing you mentioned that, Paul, because we're up against the news, and I do need a little bit of time to play that. So I'm Paul. Yep. I got a text from Ty, who said he's tired of hearing that Republicans want to get rid of Social Security, and what proof do I have? In May of 2023, Florida Senator Rick Scott talked about Social Security. This is what he said, Ty. Listen to this.
Recently put out an 11-point plan to rescue America, two of the big points of which are, quote, all Americans should pay some income tax. It also says all federal legislation sunsets in 5 years. So that would raise taxes on half of Americans and potentially sunset programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Why would you propose something like that in an election year?
Sure. Well, John, that's, of course, the Democrat talking points. It's a No,
it's in the plan. It's in the plan.
Let's think about reality for a second. Let's talk about Medicare.
But Senator, hang on.
John.
So it's not a Democratic talking point. It's in the plan. Recently.
Yeah. Republicans, when they're asked directly about this, Ty, do try to weave on this one, to use a Donald Trump phrase, but it is in their written plan for a next administration. If you like, let's see, I can go through the Mandate for Leadership 2025 and find the appropriate passages and post them on social media, Ty. But for you to say this is not what Republicans intend to do, sweetheart, you're not paying attention, because they talk about it all the time. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with William Campbell right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
I'd like to pull the curtain back a little bit on what it's like to be a radio host, let me just tell you that as you get closer and closer to the holidays, people are very distracted, and they forget that they're supposed to talk to you, and they don't answer your calls or your emails. We're only 2 days into the week, and sometimes I feel like Paul Chavaria and I are putting this show together with sticky tape. So I promised you a conversation with William Campbell, a conversation that William Campbell agreed to and apparently has forgotten about. So we will see if I hear from him. We will see if he responds to Paul's invitation to connect with the studio. What, Paul? Edwin or William? Okay. So, yeah, we reached out to Edwin Eisendrath to see if he would join us as a guest. And he is here. Edwin, thank you so much. Man, I don't know if this is happening to you on weekends, but people are it's only the beginning of December, and people are checking out, man. People you confirm with. Remember, we're going to be talking.
Thank you for calling. I'm happy anytime. It's not like I don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
But Joan, I think people are checking out, not just because it's the holidays, but people are, on our side, people are definitely downcast and angry and feeling beaten up and feeling abandoned. I mean, I heard that from callers, Saturday, and I've heard it from others. I think people are, they're just not as eager to get out there anymore.
I think you're 100% right, and that really scares me. I mean, I know that losing an election is never easy, but now on top of losing an election and dealing with that kind of sorrow and grief, now we're looking at 4 years of craziness, 4 years of chaos. And honest to God, Edwin, I mean, the idea of spending the next 4+ years wading through all of this nonsense, it's enough to make me want to pack a bag and head off to, I don't know where, Italy, the Caribbean, somewhere else.
Yeah, it's depressing a little bit, but we have to do it. And, I'm going to write about this today. I got this message, as you do all the time, in my email from somebody pitching to be a guest on the show. And the pitch was from something called Truth PR. And it began with, Dr. Fauci killed more people than World War I and World War II combined. And I have the experience. So for the next 4 years, what we're going to have is their nonsense wrapped in a bodyguard of lies. And I want to tie to Kristen Welker's second complete failure in interviewing Donald Trump this weekend. We just got to stop listening to the man. The news media does not owe him a platform. He can talk to the public all he wants through Truth Social and through X. He doesn't need any help from the media to do it. But every time they do it, they look like they are part of the lie. So let's just cover what they do. There'll be plenty to work on. There'll be plenty of things that they're actually going to do that we can talk about, as opposed to whatever the nonsense is that's coming out of their mouths.
What do you think about the reasoning of Joe and Mika from MSNBC that it was a no-brainer to go down to Mar-a-Lago to try to open a dialogue with a man who'd just been reelected to the presidency?
I think that they're scared, and I think they know better than to pretend it's normal. I think they're scared. People are scared, and that cable channel's up for sale. I mean, it's all kinds of things, but I wish they hadn't done it. I really wish they hadn't done it.
Yeah. And what amazes me is that they seem utterly shocked at all of the blowback that they've gotten for it. And they've gotten really as a matter of fact, Joe Scarborough said last week that, you know, at least they were transparent in the fact that they went down to Mar-a-Lago because, you know, the Washington Post and the New York Times have done the same thing. It was all just off the record. I was not aware of the Washington Post or the New York Times sending a delegation down to Mar-a-Lago to chat with Trump. Are you?
I don't doubt that they have opened the door. I don't know. I mean, certainly the owner has of the Washington Post. So, I mean, it also doesn't matter, right? I mean, just because somebody else does it doesn't mean it's a good idea. You know, they know better, and it's depressing as all get out that they went and decided this was the thing they should do. But, you know, like I said, and you've said, we're on our own. You know, nobody's riding in to help us. If we want this democracy to stand, we have to do the work ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And so let's do the work.
Yeah.
Because what are we going to do? We got to do the work.
You mentioned getting that pitch that started with about how many people Dr. Fauci had killed. Dr. Fauci has been one of the names floated that should get a Joe Biden pardon. I'm a little, supposedly, you know, the White House says, oh, we're thinking about it. We're thinking about it. I frankly think that when he announced the pardon for Hunter Biden, he should have said, and the 60 people Kash Patel's going after, and these people who Donald Trump has said he's going after. I think that he should get out in front of this. Yes, I think Liz Cheney should get a pardon. Yes, I think Dr. Fauci should get a pardon. These are not normal times. And you have a president coming in who wants to weaponize government to punish perceived enemies. That is not normal. These are not normal times. Where do you stand on this whole idea of pardons?
Yeah, I don't think you should do it.
Why?
Not for anybody. As cruel as it's going to be, we have to fight in front of us and not give them another reason to make the whole world cynical, not give them more ammunition. If they come after Liz Cheney, she will win in court. And they'll appeal it where? To the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court of the United States is going to do the most ridiculous thing again, just to punish Trump's enemies. If they are going to do that, Joan, we're done anyway. So let's just say to them.
So we should just sacrifice Liz Cheney, make her go through all of that expense and emotional turmoil for a case that we're not even 100% sure the Supreme Court will back her on? That doesn't seem right, Edwin.
Cheney. It's hundreds of people, and you can't pardon them all. And the precedent of presidents pardoning everyone in their party in advance of something else is a terrible one, Joan.
But
I don't think he's going to go after everybody.
Times,
I don't think
I would agree with you.
Going to make it
100%. But, you talk about the callers that you get. I can't tell you over the last few years how many callers I've gotten who are so mad that Democrats won't fight fire with fire, that Republicans do whatever they want and Democrats just roll over. I think Joe Biden needs to look at the reality of this situation. These are not normal times. And I think he has to protect people. Who's going to work in government if they're going to be thrown to the wolves? And you can't even tell me for sure that the Supreme Court will throw away those charges. I mean, what principled person is going to say, well, yeah, I'll take my chances. Yeah, I might go to jail, but at least I'll be on the high road?
Joan, it's not. I don't think there's a chance in a million that. I mean, it's going to be no question he's going to make some people's lives miserable. We don't know whose, but he's going to do it. But Liz Cheney her life isn't going to be made more miserable than, tens of thousands of migrants to the United States. that, or heaven forbid, a trans kid. I mean, their cruelty is unprecedented for us, and it's partisan and it's awful. But we can't defend against it by preemptive pardons. We have to defend against it by always bearing witness, by standing up and fighting it for, and by the way, Joan, it's really only 1 year. If we can delay and push them for a year, then we're 1 year. If we get through this first year, then they have congressional elections coming, and that's not going to be easy for them because people will remember what Donald Trump actually is like. And then there's a presidential cycle, and he's a lame duck. So we have 1 year of enormous work to do to make sure he doesn't do the worst damage to the country and the people, even though he's going to try. God knows he's going to try.
I'm talking to Edwin Eisendrath. We're going to take a quick break. Edwin, when we come back, I want to talk more about this lame duck presidency and what it means. We'll be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by WCPT host Edwin Eisendrath every Saturday from 1 to 4. He hosts The Big Picture here on our airwaves and also on the TuneIn Radio app, and you can listen live on your computer. We were just talking about Donald Trump, and Edwin referred to his lame duck presidency. I have two thoughts about this. First of all, in what I've been reading about the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate probably will, the way it was described, they will go along with Donald Trump for at least his first year, but then they'll have to pull away if they don't want to lose ground in midterm elections. And that's when, his status as a lame duck will really take away a lot of his power. But there's a part of me that says this is not a guy who went willingly last time. Why should we think he's a lame duck? Why should we think he's going to go willingly this time? So I guess there's two very different questions there, Edwin.
Right. The idea that we could somehow break the Constitution in clear language and say, I'm going to stay another term, I think is a lot harder than people think. I'm not worried that he's going to do it. I am, but I have a different thought. Really, honestly, 4 years from now, you don't think America is going to be storming the ramparts to get rid of him? I mean, do you remember how unpopular he was when he was a younger man and bungled COVID so terribly? The world is a difficult place, and we're in for a difficult 4 years because it's a hard job. And the Biden administration, they did some things. They did a lot of political things wrong, but they did a lot of the governing things right. And still, it's a hard job, right? Donald Trump is going to be chaos for 4 years. People's lives aren't going to be better. There is no way people's lives are. I mean, if they are going to be better, God bless them. I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, man, I was wrong. But it's too hard a job. It's too much actual work. And they don't want to do the work. They want to tell the lies. And people are going to know, and they're going to change. I mean, even if he could run again, it would be a pleasure to vote him out again, and people will.
I guess I'm just scared because I was one of those people who really thought we were going to have a Kamala Harris presidency. I thought with the Roe v. Wade stuff and the young people being motivated, I thought we had what it took to win this election. And I was so wrong. I was so completely wrong. And now I'm worried about the midterms. Maybe I'm wrong again, because you're right.
Joan,
usually people get tired of him, but what if they don't?
We do this to ourselves. It's not fair, Joan. You weren't completely wrong. I thought we'd win, too, and I thought it would be really, really close. Turns out we lost, and it was really, really close, right? But there's no mandate here. He didn't win a huge victory. He barely won, and young people helped him win. People in America have said now, I don't know, like 80 elections in a row, hey, we are not happy with the direction of the country. We are disgusted by the growing gap between the richest people in the world and the rest of us. That doesn't feel like a democracy. We are mad about health care. Look, I mean, and I don't think it's right to shoot anybody, but if you look at what people are saying after this guy died, the murder in New York, it's perfectly clear, again, if you weren't paying attention, how much America is infuriated by health insurance and health care. Americans want something different, and they're not getting it. They got some of it with Biden, but not enough, not fast enough. Trump promised different, and people believed him. It's not the difference they asked for, and they're going to notice. They're going to notice pretty quick. But, yeah, I wouldn't worry. I mean, I would worry about America because we are having a very difficult time, and Citizens United is the biggest reason, because people can buy off Congress and stop them from doing what Americans want them to do.
Yeah.
We have to, we just have to, but we have to bear witness, because they're going to be surrounded by lies for the next few years.
One thing that I've observed, and one thing that was discussed before this election, is there are a lot of people who have been a part of a party, whether it's Republican or Democrat, basically their whole lives. And that sometimes, even when presented with a inferior candidate, they simply cannot change a lifetime of pulling those levers. I know at least one person who is quite open about the fact that they voted for Trump, and when asked why, they're a Republican. They've always been a Republican. They've always voted Republican. I like to think that some of us in the Democratic Party are not quite so rigid. I was thinking about Mark Kirk, our Republican senator from Illinois, who I thought was very reasonable, very middle of the road, kind of a Charles Percy type. And I'd like to think that
only those of us on Medicare know who you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think that I'm one of those people who could vote across the aisle if I felt that it was a really good candidate. Is that stupid? Is that Pollyanna? Is it just too hard for people to change a lifetime of habit?
It's hard that people do it, and a lot of Republicans did it. Donald Trump didn't win this election because of traditional Republicans. He won because he brought a whole bunch of people who were never anything to the party. I mean, people do. They stay home if they have too much trouble, and the candidate on their side is a dope. That's, God knows, people do that. It's hard, the choice has to be pretty clear, but most people do. Oh, and think about a lot of those Republicans didn't vote for Trump. That whole never Trumper world is made up of Republicans, or at least people who used to be Republicans.
One thing that I think it was Joe Walsh said after this election, in the conversation I had had with him leading up to the election, he really truly believed that there was a possibility that the Never Trump Republicans would coalesce and form some kind of party on their own, that the Republican Party would start to right itself after a Donald Trump resounding loss. And after Donald Trump had a win in the presidential election, Joe Walsh said, you know what? I was wrong. This is who the Republican Party is, and I believe this is what the Republican Party will be for the foreseeable future, certainly what I'm going to see in my lifetime. What do you think about that?
I think there was an effort, you know about it, of Republicans to create a new party called No Labels. They lied and said it wasn't the Republican Conservative Party trying to do what it was doing. And if they'd just been honest and said we need a new conservative party in America, they might have done the country a favor. But they pretended they were something else for a while because maybe they couldn't get out of their habit of Republican lying. even to create a new party. I wish they had. We need a right of center party and a left of center party. Instead, we have, this gigantic tent that's Democrats and these nutcases that are MAGA, and that's really dangerous.
I saw somebody postulated about Democrats. Tom Nichols wrote about this, but he's not the only one who's written about this. Tom Nichols from The Atlantic, your good friend who you got an interview with, and I was so jealous, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, Tom Nichols wrote that it's time for the Democratic Party to focus on winning. And what he meant by that was being more pragmatic. What does it take to win? I don't know if it was he who wrote it or somebody else. There was that sound clip that Kamala Harris it was used against her where she was talking about trans prisoners should have the access to medical care. And his argument was that she had been pressured by a progressive group into making that statement, and that was the kind of thing that the Democrats had to be more pragmatic about, not get dragged down in issues, in kind of marginalized issues, and that they had to focus on winning. And if that meant moving to the middle and not, doing everything that every progressive group wants you to do, then that's what the Democratic Party has to do. What are your thoughts on that?
I am a Midwestern, pragmatic, get-it-done Democrat. I don't think there's anything wrong with winning. But I don't think you have to abandon people to win. The Republicans like to weaponize our humanity against us. They will pick on the most marginal folks, marginalized folks, folks without power in our country, like, trans kids, and bait us into defending them. We just haven't done it smart. So I want to answer the question by saying, yep, we should do what it takes to win. But doing what it takes to win is not abandoning a trans community. It's not abandoning anybody. It's bringing everybody along. And when Republicans attack, we should go after their cruelty. When they steal, we should go after their cupidity. There's just not. So we've done it in a way that makes us vulnerable, but there's a way to be strong about this and to tell everybody, we have everyone's backs. You can't abandon people. That doesn't mean, that's on the humanity side. There are policies on the left that are way ahead of their time, if their time will come at all. And we don't have to champion all of them until they are better socialized in the American psyche. So, there are a lot of examples of that, and I don't really want to get into them. But on the left and the right, people say things. They want to move the country in a direction, and there are always going to be people who are on the edges, who are championing things that the country isn't ready for now, may never be ready for in some of these cases. The ones on the right, I hope we're never going to be ready for sure. So we don't have to champion everything that every advocate says, but we also can't abandon anyone to the cruelties or can't be blind to the cruelties on the other side.
Edwin, thank you so much for joining me.
Joe.
I always enjoy our discussions. Thank you, my friend. It's been great.
Talk to you later.
We are going to take a break, and we'll see who we talk to, if anybody, when we come back.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
You should be signed up to get the emails from the American Civil Liberties Union, and if you can afford it, you should become a member of the American Civil Liberties Union and support them, because they are going to be a big part of our defense against the craziness that is going to be coming our way in the very, very near future. Here in Illinois, we're a little bit lucky. Illinois, California, New York. Well, there's 3 states that you can live in and probably not completely lose your mind. But a lot of these fights are going to be federal. And if there is a federal abortion ban, it is going to come to the state of Illinois. Ed Yonka from the ACLU of Illinois joins us now to talk about some of these current and potential fights. Ed, thank you for being here. How are you?
I am well, Joan. How are you today?
Oh, I'm okay, actually, all things considered. Trying very hard to get into the holiday spirit. I went out over the weekend. I was invited to an ugly sweater party, and I hate ugly Christmas sweaters. So I bought a ridiculous Christmas jacket. That's going to be my attire for the holiday season. Not an ugly sweater, an absolutely ridiculous Christmas jacket. And I couldn't be more proud. I actually wore it this morning for the first time.
That is fantastic.
I was just talking about some of the dangers that even those of us who live in New York or California or L.A. face. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but if a federal law gets passed, say a federal abortion ban, that would affect us here in Illinois, would it not, Ed?
It would. It would. We have a number of protections in place in Illinois for abortion services, for gender-affirming care, for the treatment of migrants and newcomers to the country, for free speech, for a range of things around education, et cetera. But, of course, if there are national bans, if there are national efforts to limit access to care, to limit access to abortion medication, all of those things are going to be in play here in Illinois. And I think you can see the kind of the kind of administration that we're talking about for all of your listeners who saw the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times this morning, where the incoming president's border czar comes to Chicago, insults the mayor of Chicago, insults the governor of Illinois, and says that we have to change our laws because of what he wants to do. And, you can just imagine the counterfactual, right, with someone from another administration going to Texas and telling them to change their laws around reproductive rights or change their laws around gender-affirming care. It would be, people would be clutching their pearls. But this guy comes in like a gangster who's going to say, nice state you got here, and be ashamed if anything happened to it, and threaten funding for a whole range of things if we don't fall in line with what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. You said we have some protections in place, but how would that work? I mean, I know that if there was a move for a federal ban, that it would be challenged in court, and hopefully any law that was passed would be put in abeyance until there's a court decision. But is there anything, any state law that can be put on the books that would supersede or weaken a federal law?
So not supersede it, Joan, but let's think about this for a moment. One of the things I think is a little bit under sort of recognized, reported, or at least analyzed from the past election is that for all of the conversation about places where progressive candidates or progressive interests did not succeed, the reality is that they continued to succeed, for example, around reproductive rights ballots on the measures or on the ballots in many states. Even states that ended up supporting Donald Trump largely supported ballot measures to legalize and protect reproductive rights. I think what that says is the politics around actually passing and implementing a national ban are pretty complicated. If, on the other hand, they tried to circumvent the idea of just doing a national ban by, for example, trying to, implement and enforce the Comstock Act from the late 1800s or 1900s, I think in that instance you would see legal challenges. It would be a long time before anything like that would be put in place. And then I think you could see efforts to try to roll back care or access to care in other ways. But I think those are places that you'll both see a number of legal challenges, as well as the fact that, for the moment, and we should never, ever have this conversation without saying it, abortion is safe and legal and available here in Illinois. We continue to be an oasis for people from other states around the country that have put in place these sort of cruel abortion bans, and that we need to continue to protect that and to support those services and that care here in our state.
I have a question. I thought that a basic platform of the creation of our country as 50 United States was that nothing, nobody, no how should impede somebody traveling from one state to another. No tolls, no extra special visas. And yet there are at least 2 state legislatures where someone has proposed a monitoring abortion-related bill, like that it would be illegal to transport or otherwise help a minor get abortion services in a different state. How can that be illegal?
The short answer, Joan, is I don't think it can be. And I do want to remind people that even this Supreme Court, when it overturned Roe in the Dobbs decision, Justice Kavanaugh wrote at length about how travel bans would not be legal and wouldn't be constitutional under our system. So, I think the short answer is that there's no way that such a thing is ever going to be permitted. It's always hard to know in other states, like how much of this is as we always say, just a press release piece of legislation, right? It's just some anti-abortion zealot trying to get a little bit of coverage, a little bit of attention, trying to raise money for something else. So, you never quite know how those things work out. I do think things like data privacy and keeping people from being tracked from state to state is something that we ought to be thinking about in these ways, just in case some state or a rogue state's attorney somewhere else began to try to enforce laws or enforce things from, in their state in that way. But I don't think a broad ban in one state about people traveling to another state for medical care that's legal there would ever pass muster in a court.
What about these period tracker apps? And, I was having a conversation a couple of weeks ago with my next door neighbor, and she said she had just bought one of those fire blankets that you keep in the kitchen. And I am not kidding you. For the next 2 weeks, I kept getting spam emails about fire blankets. I don't believe that data in a period tracker app, which I know a lot of young women use, I don't believe that data is safe. Do we have to do something to protect this?
We do, and we have to do 2 things. I think number one, I'm really just happy that you mentioned this, because I think the first thing we have to do is talk about the ways in which this data could be used and make clear to people that when you make the decision to use an app like that, for your convenience, for your health, et cetera, that you are at the same time creating this record, essentially this roadmap of your health care, et cetera, and that you want to be mindful of that as you do it. The second thing is that we need a state law that protects that. In other words, if a company is going to sell you an app that allows you to track your heartbeat, your blood pressure, your period, whatever that, your glucose level, all of that, they ought to have to get your permission before they share or sell that data. This is something we've been trying to work for a couple of years on in the state legislature. I think there's a recognition of the need to do that now. And, I think that I hope that we'll see something move in the year ahead, and maybe even something broader than health data, but all of our data, given the way in which a hostile federal government could try to weaponize information about us from the apps and the searches that we do online.
Yeah, that's one. And you know what, Ed, as I was just explaining the situation, I realized that my phone is sitting right here in front of me, and I'm going to be getting those fire blanket ads again. If you have a fire blanket company, I want to tell you right now, I am not interested in buying a fire blanket. Please, I beg of you, stop sending me the ads. And, I have an iPhone. I thought the big thing, Tim Cook's always saying, oh, we value security. We value privacy. Well, apparently not all the time, Ed.
Well, not all the time. And remember, there are systems that also interact and intersect with your iPhone, which have nothing to do with Apple, which gather and use and store and target you based on a lot of that sort of information. So there's a lot of interactive pieces out there that are playing into all of those ads that you're getting.
I'm talking to Ed Yonka of the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. Ed and I are going to take a real quick break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I am joined by Ed Yonka of the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. We are talking about what may be coming our way on the political front. Ed, I don't know if you saw this, but Elon Musk, in a brief moment of honesty, announced that both he and Vivek Ramaswamy, in their new roles as, budget cutters, that there was going to be a war on the poor. I think that's what a lot of Republican administrations bring, though very few are willing to actually call it that. What can the ACLU do, if anything, to help fight an effort to, make life more expensive for people who are already hurting?
Yeah. I think this is going to be one of the areas that, number one, we're all going to need to be mindful of. I think in terms of what we can do, there are people who are especially vulnerable to these kinds of cuts because, for example, there are folks who are otherwise under, state care in some ways, cutting funds that go to help, for example, children who are protected by the Department of Children and Family Services here in Illinois, but also by other kinds of agencies similar across the country. There are I think there are funds that go often to support, funding for things like health care in prison settings or, health care for people with other kinds of who are experiencing other kinds of disabilities. In lots of those instances, we have ongoing litigation with the state over assuring that their care is consistent with the constitutional requirements. And I think we would be in a place where, we could hopefully enforce, the need for the state to ensure that care continues, even though there have been, if there are draconian cuts that come to, that come through the federal government. But I think that the other piece of this is that this is one of those areas, Joan, where I keep thinking about the fact that we need to be involved from the federal level. We need to make sure that our senators and our representatives are hearing that we don't want to see these kinds of cuts, down to the local level. You know, if there are going to be dramatic cuts in terms of a lot of basic services for people who are living at or below the poverty level, for example, then maybe one of the things that we're going to need to all be is, you know, advocating at the local school board level about increased meals for kids when they come to school. Or, you know, other kinds of services that might be able to be, you know, picked up at the local level. This is not going to be something where there's going to be like a one-size-fits-all answer, I think, nationally. And I think we're all going to have to, you know, try to figure our way through where we can put the most pressure on and bring to bear, you know, either our resources as individuals or our resources collectively to ensure that the needs of people across the country are being met. I think the idea that there is some, you know, billions of dollars to slash out of the federal budget while leaving the military and, of course, the space program alone is somehow, you know, and we can balance that on the backs of those who are less fortunate, is just cruel and not something that we should just sit idly by and let happen.
Mm-hmm. How, you know, people have commented that when Obama knew he was going to be turning the White House over to Trump, that he spent his post-election, pre-inauguration days, you know, getting out there and doing things and talking about issues and really being front and center. And it seems to some people like Joe Biden has pretty much already almost ceded government to Donald Trump. I mean, you've got Donald Trump, you know, talking to French President Macron, and Donald Trump, you know, taking world leaders' phone calls. And you know, even with the fall of Syria, it happened over the weekend, and it wasn't, I believe, until Monday that President Biden even said anything about it. Does the reason that I ask about this, and the reason that I'm wondering, it seems like Donald Trump is gearing up to be president. And when he was elected the first time, that gearing up really took place after he was inaugurated, which slowed down some of the worst things on the timeline. And I'm worried that the day he's inaugurated, it's going to be like, okay, let's go build that deportation camp in Texas. Yeah. Thanks for that 1,400 acres. Let me go. I'm sorry, I can't talk very long because I have to go to the White House and sign the 30-some executive orders that the Heritage Foundation wrote up for me. I'm really nervous that the bad stuff is going to come at us sooner and faster this time around. What do you think?
I think that's a really fair point. I want to make a couple of points. Number one, I think that you know, it's almost as if Project 2025 was actually a plan for a second Trump administration. Oh, wait, it was. Yeah. Right? And so we should not be lulled into thinking that there's going to be a week or a month or a year of his in office for him to get his bearings to do all the awful things he talks about. He's going to be doing them from day one, as you said. And so we all need to be prepared for that and be on the lookout and be ready to respond, you know, as we are able to. I think the second thing I would just say is, you know, that it is also clear, again, as it was in Project 2025, that there are people, you know, with some really crazy ideas about governing, you know, who are now firmly in his camp. And he has, you know, I think that the idea that the president-elect has any real handle on these policies is just kind of ludicrous, you know. I mean, he can't even explain what a tariff is, for goodness sake. And so I think the idea that, you know, we're going to see really awful stuff because he just thinks it's going to look good. And the third thing I guess I want to say four things. The third thing I want to say is, I think you're right that it's going to come at us in a fire from a fire hose, and the idea is going to be to overwhelm and numb us. And I think we just have to be, thoughtful and deliberate in terms of response, and not just hold our heads every time something happens, but actually be prepared to, speak out, to talk to neighbors, to talk to our friends, to, point out the dangers of a mass deportation program and the disruption that will mean to our communities. If you think, well, I'm a documented person, what do I care? But I'll tell you what, if there are 7 kids at your child's school whose parents don't come home tonight, that's going to affect your child in the classroom for the next month and a half. Yeah. And so it matters to you what happens on these things. And so, I think that's really important for us to be mindful of and be prepared for. And then finally, I do want to say, that there still are things that the Biden administration can do. We know that Trump is determined to sort of set off an execution spree in the federal prison system. The president ought to, commute every death sentence in federal prisons before he leaves office. We know that the data issue we were talking about before, there's no federal guidelines around, whether or not the government can buy or sell data from these large data brokers. That's an executive order that President Biden could put in place before he leaves office. So, there are still things there that the Biden administration can do, because while I think in large measure both Donald Trump and the media seem to think he's already president, he doesn't actually have any power to do anything, and actually, Joe Biden still does.
Do you think that we are going to get any of that from this administration? I assume that they are doing things. Supposedly after the Hunter Biden pardon, they were asked about other pardons, and the answer was that they were looking at it. But I don't see a lot of Biden announcements. Hey, I'm doing this. Hey, I'm doing that. Hey, I'm doing this. And I've got to tell you, I'm a little worried.
I think that, I think I wouldn't give up hope yet. I think there are lots of conversations that are happening. I think, people in Washington and across the country, legislators and others are putting pressure on the administration to take a number of actions that they can. I think we will see some of those, before he leaves office. It's not easy, and it's not going to be easy, but I think we'll get there before we get to January 21st.
Yeah. When Ronald Reagan was at the end of his second term, he was pretty impaired, and his people sort of protected him. What if that's the reason we're not hearing from Joe Biden? What if, whether it's dementia or Parkinson's or just old age, what if he doesn't do anything, Ed? What if he doesn't do anything?
Well, I think if that were to happen, then the administration will have missed an important opportunity to put in, what protections they can. And I would think that there are people who are working in the administration who don't want to see that happen. I think that I don't know what's happening in terms of the president's health, and I wouldn't want to speculate on that. But I think, again, really. I think that it's interesting in some ways. I think we're seeing a president who is doing what is, often traditional in terms of sort of not being in the public spotlight a lot, as they're transferring power. This is part of the process. We forget about this because, of course, 4 years ago, we went through something that was completely foreign where this is concerned in terms of that transfer of power. And so, I think that doesn't stop the kind of executive orders and clemency actions and pardons and other things that we're likely to see in the last weeks, especially once we get through the holidays.
Yeah. Ed, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I have a feeling we're going to be doing this on a real regular basis in the coming months.
I would like to say I look forward to talking to you, Joan. I don't know that I'll always look forward to talking about what we'll be forced to talk about.
Yeah, tell me about it. Ed Yanka from the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois, thank you. We are going to take a break for news. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
As I said, it was just last Thursday that we were joined by Behnam Ben Taleblu, senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and we were talking about what was going to happen in Syria and how important Syria was, or the Assad regime was, to Vladimir Putin and the country of Iran. Well, over the weekend, Assad got on a plane headed to Russia, where Vladimir Putin has offered him humanitarian asylum, and the country pretty much has been taken over by rebel forces. Behnam Ben Taleblu joins us now to talk about this development in Syria. Behnam, what do you think?
Well, it's a pleasure to be back with you, and it just shows how fast things can move and have been moving in the Middle East. But then again, it should be a surprise to folks who believe that anything like a stalemate or a ceasefire, given the fire of the Syrian revolution, come Syrian civil war, come multiple foreign interventions in that country, would have easily been put out or extinguished by a piece of paper. So what we have now is the Assad regime, the Assad family, which has governed from Damascus in Syria for a little over half a century, no longer in power. As you mentioned, he reportedly took a flight out to Moscow, his major state patron. And we have now, for the first time, a break in the Iran-backed axis of resistance, because Syria, under the Assad family, was the long pole in the tent of the Islamic Republics of Iran's attempts to use failed states and proxy forces and terror groups to project power to reach the eastern Mediterranean, to be able to threaten Israel. It was through a permissive environment, through Assad's father, Mr. Hafez al-Assad, that the Islamic Republic was able to create Lebanese Hezbollah amid the Lebanese civil war in the 80s, and then be able to benefit from a permissive jurisdiction of failed states across the northern tier of the Middle East that we popularly call the land bridge strategy, the ability for Iran to use Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon to move men, money, and munitions across the war zones of the Middle East will now be challenged by the lack of their state patron in Damascus. But because this is the Middle East, and because there's always the potential for things to get worse, not better, we have to take into account that the leader of one of the groups of part of this larger coalition of forces that have toppled Assad is al-Qaeda linked. And just because they haven't engaged in sectarian slaughter and minority slaughter at present doesn't at all mean that stuff may not happen in the future, given the various fighting forces and conflicting voices on the ground now in Syria. But nonetheless, for the Syrian people who have suffered for more than half a century under the hands of the Assad family, now is the moment to take a breather before the next crisis.
Well, toward that, I've been trying to figure out exactly who these rebels are. I've read that there's different factions that came together. One pundit that I read speculated it's even possible ISIS is a part of this. Who are these rebels? And, because I was reading, don't expect that there's going to suddenly be a democracy. Who are these people, and what is Syria going to look like? Do you have any idea?
Well, it's going to continue to look like the next phase of what we've been seeing, which is the slow burn of the Syrian civil war. It's always interesting when the guns stop firing and people have to start talking, because had those differences been able to be resolved with paper and pen and speech rather than guns, conflicts would not have erupted in the first place. But to the heart of your question, there is a formerly al-Qaeda-linked group, but a group that nonetheless has a Salafist jihadist ideology, and that group is HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, origins of another more problematic terror group in the Syrian conflict called Jabhat al-Nusra. That's basically the al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. These guys sometimes gave al-Qaeda forces and ISIS forces really a run for their money when it comes to gruesome battlefield and other kind of really, I'll leave it up to individuals to Google the kind of things that were done by these forces on the battlefield as well as against civilian populations for a very long time. But just because in their model of governance, particularly since that stalemate and ceasefire since 2020 in northwest Syria, they have learned to play the political and pragmatic game, not taking on state patrons, not antagonizing the civilian populations, and trying to present a softer face for, make no mistake, on a good day is a very dangerous brand of Islamism.
People have been talking about the leadership vacuum and who is going to fill that vacuum. Would it be safe to assume that Iran and Russia are trying to influence who fills that leadership vacuum?
Well, it's very interesting that you mention Iran and Russia, because they're the big losers of what has just happened. Russia is really confined to where it has its naval base in Tartus. It's really dubious how long it could really keep a foothold in the eastern Mediterranean now, with, again, the loss of the Assad family. The Islamic Republic, again, the Assad regime has been the sole state ally of the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. And indeed, the Islamic Republic spent considerable blood, treasure, and national reputation to bail this guy out. And they did so for 13 years, only at the end to watch his army crumble in less than 2 weeks. So they are looking to make inroads, looking to make gains. If you look at Iranian media, for example, state-sponsored media, they are talking about how the regime officials are trying to talk to HTS and other Islamist opposition forces. But make no mistake, this is a historic defeat for the axis of resistance, of which Iran is at the top of, as well as for the axis of aggressors, where Russia under Putin is at the top of.
A permanent defeat or a setback? I'm wondering if part of the reason why Putin is welcoming the Assad family is that maybe there is some hope that in the chaos of efforts to form a new government, that things don't work out so well, and maybe at some point in the future, he can send Assad back to Syria. Is that a possibility, or is that too far-fetched?
It's not far-fetched. It's unlikely at present, but I would say it is not at all far-fetched. In fact, many, many years ago, a friend of mine who studies Russia much more so than I told me of this proverb. I don't know if it's an adage or a Russian saying or a saying that he came across in his life. He was actually born in the Soviet Union. And he said, "There is no honor among thieves." So between Putin and Assad, there was a strategic relationship. There may not be a relationship based on honor and trust. Syria, under the Assad family, of course, was a large client of the Soviet Union, then, of course, of the Russian Federation. But if trading away Assad at some future point in time as a chip to retain that foothold or to potentially even expand that foothold, and even if this is something that HTS or future governing forces would want, that remains to be seen. But I think Putin is someone who always keeps his options open. And just as he helped get Assad out, there may be a world where he sends him back.
We need to take a break. We are talking to Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. We're talking about what is unfolding in Syria, and we will continue our talk right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I am joined by Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. We are talking about the rapidly developing situation in Syria. I'm sure you saw today the reports that amid this chaos of who's in charge, the Israelis thought it would be a good time to take out some military targets with their jets and their missiles. Was that a surprise to you?
It's an excellent question, and honestly, no, not at all, because even under the limited control of the Assad regime, and one ought not to joke about this, but I did make a joke that it became a free-fire zone. It became a free-fire zone for the U.S., for the Russians, for the Israelis, for the Iranians, as well as a whole host of foreign fighters and militias, not least, of course, the other more local forces in the Syrian civil war. Now that you have those major air defenses previously manned by the Syrian army, as well as other assets tied to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, either collapsed, vacated, or nullified, this actually makes imminent strategic sense. Also, because Syria is not just home to certain kinds of long-range strike capabilities like ballistic missiles that you wouldn't want to have fall into the hands of certain rebel groups, but you also want to make sure that the chemical program, which unfortunately was not fully dismantled in 2013, and even international organizations like the OPCW have continued to raise the alarm bell about and have collaborated with other countries that don't have a good chemical records history, such as the Islamic Republic of Iran, for example, that those facilities are taken out. And in fact, if someone was in the business of looking at targets that should be gone after in the future as well, it shouldn't just be the facilities that produce chemical weapons. I think in the past, the U.S. and the Trump administration either once or twice has gone after WMD chemical weapons-related facilities, but also on the southern part of Syria, a trade that really benefited the Assad regime as well as certain militias in the region was the Captagon trade. This is basically the party drug, the ecstasy-type drug that is industrially produced with a whole host of imported chemical precursors in a host of laboratories in southern Syria that militias and other Bedouin smugglers brought into the southern parts of the Gulf countries, of the GCC countries, and is increasingly making its way into Europe. And this is a trade that actually helped to get the Assad regime and some of the Iran-backed militias around some of the international sanctions that had constrained them. So it would make eminent sense to go after chemical weapons facilities and Captagon-related laboratories. Now, there was allegations about them going after chemical weapons facilities, but one wonders if the U.S. and the Israelis are going to see this threat the same way, particularly come January 2025, and what might be a slightly expanded but still modest target set to make sure that these capabilities don't get into the hands of some of the more dangerous or worrisome rebel forces.
The updated reporting from the Washington Post is that Israel is now saying that they have wiped out the Syrian Navy, not just a boat or two, but they've wiped out the Navy, and they've wiped out all the weapons stockpiles across the country. Now, in any kind of reconstituted Syria, this is going to weaken any government that takes over, will it not? I mean, if they can't defend themselves?
The question in there is an excellent question, because the question there is defend themselves against whom or use weapons against whom. Syrian Navy, at the top of my head, I'm not sure of the robust capabilities that they may have had to begin with. I'm sure the Russian Navy, which was close by, may have been watching with a certain degree of fear and awe at the same time. But with respect to forces on land, one thing that has not happened thus far has been basically the exact opposite of what the U.S. did in Iraq after 2003, which is de-Baathification and disbanding the Iraqi army. Here in Syria, at least based on what's been reported for now, given that much of the Syrian army melted away, there is a way to constitute, those forces that have not engaged in war crimes, and therefore would be ways to deduce this into something of a local force. Again, much of this will depend on the permissibility of using what's left of state institutions, state forces to govern the country, because there, at least in some of the Assad regime pockets, there was a normal day-to-day in elements of this country. You want to make sure that civilians are not starving after the change of government, for example. You want to make sure there's a modicum of order in an otherwise highly fractious country. So my priority would be to focus on the army, see what HTS as well as some of the southern opposition forces have in store for them. In the very, very, very short term, it's not the worst option right now that you don't have this disbandment, and that, in my view, is a good thing. How that plays out politically on the ground will matter very much, because you still have issues with the Kurds in the north. You still have the drama over will the U.S. retain its position. You still have the potential for ISIS forces to reconstitute in some areas. So there will be security threats, and there will need to be coordination with pre-existing security and political agencies. And here I would point to the fact that there is some level of cooperation with elements of a transitionary political government or directorate set up with outgoing lower-level Assad individuals like the prime minister and this rebel-led opposition. So not too worried about the Navy, but let's focus on what's going on with the Army and the political forces on land.
A couple of questions about that. While Assad and his family left for Russia, virtually, seemingly to me, every other member of his government they didn't get the memo. I think they were all left behind. Are we going to see incarcerations? Are we going to see the incoming folks making deals? Are we going to see executions?
I think you're also going to see a whole host of leaks. I think any of the above is possible. I mean, lest we forget, this is a classic dictatorial move where you expend every card that you have to save yourself, and then you ultimately pivot and leave, or you ultimately get to take the emergency parachute or the emergency plane, and that apparatus that defended you kind of crumbles upon itself or collapses on its own internal and external contradictions. So here in Syria, I would watch very carefully for how some of these opposition forces deal with what's left of the Assad regime. Will that, too, be a sign of their additional pragmatism? Will that, too, be proof that they can respect the rule of law? I mean, looking back to friends who had family and loved ones partake in the Syrian uprising when it was peaceful in 2011, I mean, that was ultimately what people wanted. They wanted respect and equality before the rule of law. They wanted the rule of law, not the whims of a certain man. It doesn't matter if that was a secular optometrist or ophthalmologist or whatever Assad was, an eye doctor essentially, who was an autocrat and a brutal one at that, or a kind of Islamist dictatorship. You know, the point was to actually have the rule of law and equal representation before that rule of law. And how we square the circle with an armed Islamist opposition, a country that is still a free fire zone, and what's left of that odious regime will give the people who actually, as you see on social media and on news websites, are flooding back to Damascus because they want the peace of their country. That will be the green light or the red light for them to make sense of how things will unfold in the future.
We have talked about other powers in the area, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. What does this regime fall in Syria mean for them?
Well, it's very interesting when you look at some of the countries on the southern part of the Persian Gulf, like the UAE, for example. Like, they had been trying for quite a while to rehabilitate elements of the Assad regime and push for a diplomatic way to divide Assad from Syria, Assad in Syria from their patrons in Iran and also in Russia. In my view, I think that would have been a dubious political ploy, but one that nonetheless was happening. I think it was more rooted in ideology and political optics than in political reality, but c'est la vie. For Saudi Arabia and some of the other pro-status quo powers, they rightly fear what could be an Islamist kind of insurgent backlash across the region. They weren't too happy with what was happening when Assad was in power, but they also rightly have concerns about what the implications may be for a major state in the northern tier of the Middle East to fall to Sunni Islamist insurgents.
I told you I read one article that said, don't expect Syria to become a democracy. Okay, that's fine. So what will it become? Will it become a theocracy? What do you see happening?
I mean, this is a really, I would say, trillion-dollar question right now. The question is, when you have guys with guns in politics, it's hard to stop the use of guns to affect political means. I mean, that really will be a problem here. HTS has shown itself to be much more clever and much more cunning than I think some people gave, these types of groups credit for. But it'll be very much contingent on the political process inside Damascus. Now, who defines the contours of that political process, and to what degree do those ordinary Syrians, especially those that you see on video streaming back to Damascus, get to have a say? That I respectfully have no clue about. Because my fear is the guys with guns never easily give up those guns.
Wow. And, this is really pure speculation, but how do you think Assad and his family are going to be treated in Russia? Is Putin going to take good care of them, give them great lodgings, at least until he knows whether or not there's any further use for Assad? What is their life going to be like, do you think?
We can't. We can't know for sure, but we can certainly speculate. There was a rumor, after all, that Assad had purchased or sought to purchase some sort of this emergency compound, apartment complex, if you will, for himself in Russia. The assumption is that it'll be monitored by the security services, but otherwise it could be laissez-faire. They may not want to integrate into Russia. The Russians may not want them to integrate. They both will be suspicious of each other, but they'll be both actually they'll be both kind of quite content with the situation until something forces one of their hands, until something forces Assad's hand to go public if he's mistreated by the Russians, or if the Russians sense an opportunity to use him. I think those are both low probability things, but they're not things that have a zero chance. So there's probably a non-zero chance of both of those things happening. It's really just a matter of time and what external conditions force their hand.
Wow. Benham, thank you so much for rejoining us on such short notice to talk about this situation that has rapidly changed in Syria. Really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure, and great to be back with you, and preemptive season's greetings. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, everything to you and your audience, and great to be in touch.
Thank you. Watch out. You're going to be a regular here if you don't watch out. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with Rich Eberwein and Heartland Signal after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Once a week, Rich Eberwein, who's a reporter for Heartland Signal, brings us 3 stories we might have otherwise missed. Ray. Sorry, Rich. Ray is actually my partner. You are Rich. You are the reporter, and you're sitting in the studio with Paul. So, see, I can pull it out if need be. It's just been a wacky kind of a day.
Oh, yeah. I am Rich. That is me. In name only, though.
I like that. So tell me what Heartland Signal has been working on.
Yeah, sure. First off, we got a story from Missouri that we published yesterday. So there's a Senate-elect out there by the name of David Gregory who introduced a pretty controversial bill about immigration, and we have an audio clip that he posted on X of him explaining what's in the bill. So if we can listen to that.
This bill will make it a felony to be here in this state illegally. This bill will finally allow our police officers to arrest illegal immigrants. And it'll allow our Department of Public Safety to investigate, to determine if someone's illegal, and dispatch licensed bounty hunters to effect those arrests. Once convicted, illegal immigrants will no longer have access to public benefits paid for by our tax dollars. And much like Crime Stoppers and other federal hotlines, if you submit an anonymous tip that leads to the arrest of an illegal immigrant, you'll be rewarded $1,000. The voters have spoken. It's time to get serious about illegal immigration. President Trump, Missouri will have dangerous illegal immigrants gift-wrapped and ready for deportation.
Rich, I hate hearing that argument that so many Republicans give that somehow illegal folks who are undocumented, people who are not in this country with the proper paperwork, are somehow draining our resources. And folks, I saw a statistic recently where the vast majority of the people who are in this country who are not citizens, they have jobs, they pay taxes, and you know what? They are, because they're not citizens, they are not eligible for government services. Oh, my goodness, if we could just put that to rest. And then the other aspect of this, Rich, hey, report your neighbors. Oh, that's icky.
Yeah, you can imagine the amount of just turmoil that this bill, if passed, would cause. Because what he plainly lays out in the bill is that this sets up a bounty hunting system for undocumented immigrants, and that comes with major concerns on civil liberties and safety. It creates the law. It would create a precedent of, like, if you are not a legal resident of the United States, it is a felony just to be in the state of Missouri, punishable with life in prison. It's extremely out there. And, the estimates are that there are, upwards of 10 million people living in this country that are undocumented immigrants. And, just the other day, the Senate was hearing testimony about how much Donald Trump's policy would cost taxpayers of deporting all of them, which, is obviously just ridiculous.
Well, I'm sure you saw the reporting in, the various Chicago outlets today that Tom Homan, the border czar, the man who created the family separation policy, was speaking at a Republican gathering in Chicago. And he pretty much said, yeah, we're going to do mass deportations. And you know what? I think we're going to start with Chicago. And if your mayor tries to protect people who are undocumented, yeah, we're going to arrest him. So I think we are we're going to be facing some very interesting times, and not just in these red states. I think, Donald Trump has a real bug up his butt for blue states and especially blue cities. I think we're going to see craziness here. Hopefully not as crazy as what you just reported, though.
Yeah.
How are the other lawmakers receiving that?
Yeah, it's definitely been met with a lot of pushback, because this is by far the most extreme immigration bill that's been proposed, and there isn't much that I've seen to say that this bill would pass. I think a lot of it has to do with just this guy, David Gregory, stoking the fear and, the storyline that Donald Trump likes to, put on the American people, that immigrants are ruining our lives. And, this was obviously a clear message straight to Donald Trump, like, hey, I agree with that. I'm doing everything I can to look as extreme as you. I'm out here in Missouri. And I saw an interesting interview that KCTV did with an actual bounty hunter, like a real bounty hunter that works in Kansas. And he said that this law, his work as a bounty hunter is, it happens when a judge gives him a warrant and says, somebody's failed to appear in court, and then that person is apprehended. This law does not have anything of the sort, and he said that it would not be. It doesn't make it clear whether the bounty hunters would be acting as federal agents or need a warrant from judges, and it would implement a database of tracking down undocumented immigrants and keeping track of them, and then apprehending them, and doesn't say where they would be held or anything along those lines. So there is a lot of concerns about it, and I don't think it will pass. But like again, I said, it seems like David Gregory is just kind of being like, hey, Trump, Mr. Trump, I'm out here and I'm willing to, go along with whatever you say.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know, maybe we're seeing this sort of flurry of these crazy Republican laws just for that reason, Don't forget about me, Donald Trump. Don't forget about me. I'd love to be appointed to something at the national level.
Yeah, it seems to be the position of a lot of Republican lawmakers these days. Like, well, as long as Donald Trump approves of what I'm saying, then I will be successful. And that's at the expense of whoever.
Yeah. And I know there was just an article over the weekend in the Washington Post about LGBTQ people in certain states who are contemplating moving because remember when the Dobbs decision knocked down Roe v. Wade, Clarence Thomas said, well, you know, the same faulty reasoning was used in Obergefell, which was the gay marriage decision.
Yeah.
I know you've been following some stories about this. What have you got?
Yeah, another state lawmaker, representative named Josh Shriver over in Michigan, he made a post on X earlier this month calling for gay marriage to be illegal again, and also saying that his position is not controversial or extreme at all, despite, polling suggesting that
it's controversial.
Right. I mean,
and unpopular.
There has been support for same-sex marriage in the United States by the majority of Americans for, upward since the 2010s, early 2010s. There was a Gallup poll that I found from 2022 suggesting that it's at an all-time high of 71%. So I think that is a controversial position to take. And, to your point, Shriver has reposted a lot of quotes from Clarence Thomas, who, of course, like you said, suggested that the court should look at Obergefell again. And, the Supreme Court has lied essentially in the past about not wanting to overturn abortion when, Donald Trump's picks were.
Oh, it's precedent.
Yeah.
It's precedent. It's decided law. No reason for me to be talking about that.
Yeah. All it takes is a case to get to the Supreme Court. And, we would probably see a similar situation play out with gay marriage if they were given the opportunity. There's no reason to believe not. So, yeah, this is just, I think it's another, opportunity for an extreme MAGA Republican to, make headlines and position themselves, hopefully, for a further promotion from Donald Trump maybe in the future. But yeah, hopefully this, with the Republicans taking back the state house in Michigan, hopefully there are no bills like this that are proposed.
And I seem to recall from your reporting that this is not the first outrageous thing from Josh Shriver in Michigan. Didn't he also oppose a bill that would have criminalized child marriage? I'd love to get his reasoning on that. What else has he been up to?
One of 4 Republican lawmakers in Michigan who opposed that bill. He's no stranger to controversy, and he's only been in the Michigan legislature for a short time. There was one more. He also backed a bill, or called for a bill to ban birth control, saying that it's dangerous.
I'm sorry, birth control?
Yes, birth control.
Okay.
And then he's also he was stripped of his committee assignments, actually, earlier this year when he was peddling the Great Replacement theory, which, if you don't know, is, basically this kind of racist conspiracy theory that, that...
Isn't that the Jews will not replace us kind of thing?
I think it's a lot of it has to do with, the power of white people diminishing, and it's being controlled by a global conglomerate of people or something. So he was making posts about that and was stripped of his committee assignments, but won re-election in November nonetheless.
Really?
Yes.
Whoa. I can understand voting somebody into office. You're a Republican, they're a Republican. But when you really see who they are and what they're doing, wow, what a district he represents.
Yes, it's very, very concerning. But, yeah. And then the third story we had was another Missouri one, and this had to do with abortion as well. Earlier this month, for a constitutional amendment that voters approved in Missouri, basically enshrined reproductive rights into state law. Despite that, the Missouri GOP has been angling to pass more abortion restrictions to basically undermine the will of the voters. One would establish another constitutional amendment to make voters decide whether life begins at conception or not. And if that passed, it would basically classify abortion as murder and outlaw the practice again.
See, that's a really important part of this issue, though, because I think that if somebody's religion says don't get an abortion, that's fine. But this idea that when you've got two cells that merge, that somehow that's life, that's not. I happen to be pro-abortion rights. I'm not a baby killer. I don't want to kill babies. I don't think 2 cells or even 4 cells or 8 cells or 16 cells or 32 cells, that's not a baby. A baby is when it's viable. If you can remove what's inside a woman's body and it will live on its own, hey, I have no problem. That's a baby. But until then, it is a conglomeration of dividing cells. And this whole idea that this instant conception happens, you've got a baby, that's a religious belief. That is not a scientific belief. And if that's your religion, fine, practice it, follow it as to your heart's content. But don't expect me to. That's where I think the arrogance of these people, because they want these religious ideas codified as a law. I don't get that.
Yeah. Basically pushing religious ideas on the rest of us, which, there's a separation of church and state for a reason. And everybody has the right to practice whatever religion they want. And, just advocating for that in the name of religion is just kind of un-American in my opinion anyway, because that everybody is entitled to practice the way they want,
Yeah. But I remember years ago, Mike Flynn, the guy who was fired by Obama and ended up going to jail and getting pardoned by Trump, Mike Flynn was being interviewed, and he said to the reporter, well, I don't see why we can't be a Christian nation. And I wonder how Hindus and Jews and Muslims and Baha'i felt about that. Why can't we just be a Christian nation? Somebody really ought to sit him down and have a chat with him. But, that I feel that there's this sort of a Christian attitude, Christian beliefs, a Christian morality, which is great, which is all well and good if that's how you want to live your life. But I think it is just antithetical to how our country was founded, that anyone's religious beliefs should be foisted on the rest of us.
Yeah. Even before the country was founded, the whole reason people started coming to the New World was to escape religious persecution. It's kind of ingrained in the country, but some people want to see that done away. And then another one of those laws that the GOP was proposing in Missouri was to kind of couple the abortion issue with transgender surgeries for minors. Basically just like putting another constitutional amendment saying we need to ban both of them. And, obviously these are two extremely different issues.
Yeah. I'm going to be talking tomorrow with Carolyn Shapiro, who is an expert on the Supreme Court, and I want to ask her about that, the hearing the justices gave to the case from Tennessee where the state of Tennessee wants the legal right to ban all gender-affirming care for minors, regardless of whatever parents, kids, or doctors feel about it. And sadly, court watchers have a tendency to predict rulings based on how the questioning goes. And the reports were that the questioning seemed to be pretty much along party lines.
Yeah. I mean, that's another narrative that Donald Trump puts on the American people, and a lot of people buy into it, that, it's immigrants and transgender people are ruining your lives, and that's why the prices of groceries are so high. It doesn't make any sense. And I think we will see, in the upcoming administration that, his solutions to these problems, are much to be desired.
Well, it's going to be interesting because I've been watching some interviews with folks like out in California and other agricultural states. And they were interviewing this one woman who lives in an agricultural area. And she said, she goes, last time Donald Trump tried to do this, we couldn't find anybody to pick the fruit. And guess what? We couldn't get white people to take those jobs at any price. Nobody wanted to spend their day picking strawberries. So guess what's going to happen? There's going to be a lot lower fruit picking and fruit shipping and fruit prices and other vegetables and things like that. All that stuff is going to get really expensive, she said, just like it did last time under Donald Trump. So we got that to look forward to, Rich.
Yes. So lovely. And not to mention the whole tariff thing, if he is able to go through with his idea to implement tariffs on everybody, and that just drive prices up even more, according to experts. So, yeah, lovely things up ahead. But, yeah, that's basically what my reporting has been on over the last week when I haven't been glued to Twitter looking at baseball stuff and the CEO
hey,
shooter
you know what?
story.
Whatever brings you your zen, that's good. Rich Eberwein works for Heartland Signal, and a lot of his reporting can be found at heartlandsignal.com. Rich, thank you again for being here.
Yep, always a pleasure, Joan. Have a good one.
You too. We are going to take a break, and I will be wrapping things up right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I mentioned that tomorrow I was going to be talking to Carolyn Shapiro. She's, of course, the co-director of the Institute on the Supreme Court at Chicago-Kent College of Law. We are going to be talking about that Tennessee measure that's before the Supreme Court about gender-affirming care for minors and how she sees that playing out. Also, I wanted to let you know one of my favoritist segments that I do here tomorrow from 3 to 4. I'm going to be joined by Mark Jacob and Jennifer Schulze, and we are going to be talking about the media. We have a lot of fun doing this. I hope you'll join us and be a part of the conversation. Who's doing a good job? Who's doing a bad job? What needs to change? What needs to be better? And one thing we've been focusing on lately, as people get more and more disillusioned with the mainstream media, one of the things that we've been focusing on are what are good sources of information. There are so many independent journalists now doing their own thing or pairing up with 2 or 3 other people to create these small organizations. Sometimes they put out newsletters. Sometimes they write a Substack. Sometimes they do stuff on YouTube. So that's one of the things we want to do is really give you some good ideas where you can go for good information. That, again, is going to be from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock tomorrow. So that is going to be a really exciting day for me. Patty Vasquez is, of course, coming up next. She's going to have a great show. Barbara F. Walter is going to join her. She wrote a book called How Civil Wars Start. Timely much? Seems like it. She's a professor of international affairs at UC San Diego. So that is going to be really, really interesting. She's also going to talk to the host of Outside the Box, Ben Caminos, and, of course, Dan Schaefer with the recombobulation area. That's coming up in just a few minutes with Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez from 5 to 7. Our day starts at live here at WCPT. Our day starts at 6 a.m. with the lovely and talented Richard Chew. Of course, at 5 a.m., we always replay the Rick Smith show from the night before. But Richard will be here live on the airwaves at 6 a.m., and he's going to be talking to Hoosier Blue 63, his Wednesday regular guest, Kurt Mullett. That's Chew's Views from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. And I know I've said this before, but I want to remind you guys that all Patty's stuff, all my stuff, all Richard's stuff, I assume Edwin's stuff as well, is available as a podcast. We no longer post our shows to SoundCloud. You can go back to SoundCloud for some archival shows, but now if you want to listen to a particular guest or listen to a particular day, you have to go to wherever you get your podcasts. That's places like TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, even Amazon. And what you can look for are full episodes or featured interviews. Say you missed my interview with Carolyn Shapiro tomorrow, and on Thursday, you really want to hear it. Well, go to Joan Esposito featured interviews, and you will be able to find Carolyn Shapiro and listen to that interview as a podcast. And you can subscribe so you get notified what's out there. You can subscribe to just full episodes or featured interviews, or you can subscribe to both of them. Thanks for being here today. It has been a fun day. Thanks so much to Paul Shavari and Julia Hsu for rocking and rolling with the way things have gone today. If I don't decide to run away, I will be here tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Hope to see you then. Have a great evening and good night.